We're Team 37, and this is our presentation about the engineering design process.
So our problem is to reduce lead concentrations to less than 15 ppb in all water supply lines to prevent dangerous drinking water from harming innocent communities.
We're trying to convince the client to care about this problem basically by drawing on their empathy for the communities that are affected by dangerous levels of lead in drinking water.
Our first source is called a consumer tool for identifying point of use or POU drinking water filters certified to reduce lead. So the purpose of this source in the audience is consumers of POU drinking water filters, so people that will be buying water filters for their homes. And the purpose is to inform them on how to identify which filters are properly certified to reduce the lead. The objectivity of this source is very objective. It includes a disclaimer that any brands mentioned were for informational purposes and not for endorsement or recommendation of use. For the accuracy and reliability, it's quite accurate as it simply provides labels and information for certification bodies and the standards of certification. It is also an EPA source, meaning it is reliable to some extent, and we'll get more into that later about why this might be questionable as to whether it's reliable. The authority it was written by Michelle Latham and Manthan Shah, who are both workers for the EPA, and it was published in December 2018. Our second source is called POU Water Filters Effectively Reduce Lead in Drinking Water, a demonstration field study in Flint, Michigan. The purpose of this source in the audience, the purpose is to describe the results and explain the experiment in which a field study was conducted to test the effectiveness of Faucet Mountain POU water filters for removing high concentrations of lead in drinking water from premise plumbing sources and lead service lines. The audience is scientists, government officials, individuals interested in lead filters in the population of Flint. So it's really just a study to help people understand how these filters work. So this can be helpful to government as it can help them decide which ones to buy to provide safe water for everyone. The objectivity of this source is that it's very objective as it's a scientific experiment. It's not opinionated. For accuracy and reliability, it's pretty accurate and reliable as water samples were collected at over 345 locations in Flint, Michigan. However, the data was not collected in locations other than Flint, which makes it a little less accurate. It kind of limits the pool. For the authority, it was written by several authors who you can read there. And the currency is that water samples for the experiment were collected in 2016, and then the publication was published and its final edited form in 2019. For our third source called Health Problems Caused by Lead, this is an informative source by the CDC for workers and other people that possibly could be exposed to lead and the effects of that. So what it does is it explains the health effects of lead on individuals. The audience is those at risk, such as workers or individuals exposed to lead in water or air, and government officials and scientists working to solve the problem. The objectivity of this is it's very objective as it's straight to the point with scientific information about lead and its effect on the human body. For accuracy and reliability, it's a government source, so you can assume that to be reliable. The authority is the CDC. There was no author listed, it's just from the CDC in general. And it was last reviewed in June 18th, 2018.
Our next source is, it's a news article titled "Flint Mother Details How Water Crisis Impacts Son on Autism Spectrum as $600 million Settlement Announced." The purpose of the audience, the news article, it's written about a Flint mother and her autistic son that was affected by lead in their drinking water. So it's really just meant to educate the general public and garner sympathy for the community in Flint, Michigan, surrounding their struggles. So it's not necessarily objective because it quotes the mother directly. So it's based on one individual's opinion, but it is reliable because the purpose of the news article is to provide a first person narrative. So it's directly quoting her and giving her space to talk about her struggles. It was written by MLive, it was published by MLive, which is a news organization in Michigan, which also adds to the reliability because it's a local news source, not just a national news organization. And then it was published in August 22nd of 2020, so very recently. Our fifth source is another news article. It's titled "EPA Hands Coal Industry a Pass to Dump Toxic Wastewater." The article is basically about how the EPA recently weakened the formal rules surrounding how the coal industry is supposed to dispose of their wastewater. So basically it's going to increase the levels of lead in the water. So it's really a warning for the general public and anyone who lives in an area near a coal plant to just know that their drinking water might become contaminated soon. It's not completely objective because the NRDC is an organization that's focused on combating climate change. So, they're fairly critical of the EPA's the EPA's decision recently. It is, however, a reliable organization. It's a coalition of scientists, lawyers, and policy advocates, 700 of them, who all provide their opinion. There was no author directly listed for this article, but it was published September 1st of 2020, which is, well, very recently, actually today. So there you go.
Our sixth source is titled "Basic Information About Lead in Drinking Water." And the purpose of this source was to show all the effects that having lead in your body can have on you, and why people should stay away from anything that has lead in it. And so it described many of the problems that come with having lead in your body, and also what you should do if you happen to have been exposed to a lot of lead. And the audience would be anybody who is concerned that they think that they might have been exposed to lead and they're wondering what they should do. This article also happens to be very objective because pretty much everything that's listed is straight facts, and everything is documented and comes from, you can see where all the information is coming from. It's very accurate and reliable, considering the EPA is an extremely reliable source that gathers its own information and is in line with the government. So it has to be reliable, or else nobody could trust anything. The authority, it was created and published by the EPA. Like I said before, it has ties with the government, which makes it an extremely reliable, and the authority is definitely there. This article is very current, as it was last updated on August 4th of this year. The next source is titled "Childhood Lead Poisoning Prevention." And this article is a little bit different from the last in the fact that it's more specifically talking about children and how kids should definitely be staying away from anything in lead because it will lead to developmental issues and will cause physical and mental disabilities later in life. The audience is more for parents who are trying to advocate for their kids and trying to make sure that they're staying healthy. It's also intended for mothers who are expecting children, because lead in your body will stay with your bones, and when the calcium is being given to the newborn, sometimes lead will come along and infect the baby. This article is also very objective. Everything on it is only facts. There are a lot of diagrams, and all the sources are cited. It's also a very accurate and reliable source, since the CDC is always does its own research, and it never publishes without having its articles peer reviewed, and so everything is double checked, triple checked, and it's always it's very accurate. So the authority, it's written and published by, or it's written by the CDC, and it's published by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, which it's extremely important, and it provides a lot of credibility for this source. And in terms of how current it is, it was last reviewed on July 14th, 2020, which is not too long ago.
So for our next source, it was an article by NPR titled "Lead Levels Below EPA Limits Can Still Impact Your Health." So it basically provides an opposing viewpoint to the narrative that anything under 15 parts per billion is safe, which is the EPA's limit. This article is calling out the EPA and just trying to warn the general public, which is the audience in this case, that any lead levels in the water can be dangerous. 15 parts per billion isn't necessarily safe. It's fairly objective because it's just a news article that's reporting facts. And it's also generally reliable because NPR is a well-respected national news organization. They also happen to be the authority on this. And so it's a well-researched topic, and they quote experts in the article. And it was published August 13th of 2016, so it's not completely current, but it was specifically talking about the Flint, Michigan crisis. So 2016 is around when that was occurring.
The ninth and final source is titled "Lead and Drinking Water," and this article was created for the purpose of informing people on any actions that they should take in order to make sure that they're safe when it comes to lead in drinking water. And so in this case, the audience would just be anybody who is worried, anybody who wants to take the extra steps in making sure that there is no lead coming into their house. And in terms of objectivity, there are only facts in this article. The only opinions come from a little bit of emotion that's thrown in, but it's mainly facts. And this can be easily seen because of all the diagrams and the strict wording. In terms of accuracy and reliability, it's a very accurate and reliable source because every section shows where the information is coming from. So that way you can always track it back to anywhere, to wherever it came from, including, and a lot of information came from the actual website. The authority, Clean Water Action, is the group that made this page, and they've been around for a long time, and they're comprised of scientists and a lot of politicians. So it's a very credible source. And the article was written in 2020, which is extremely recent. next, so for the constraints and criteria, so first with our constraints, we decided that our solution had to reduce lead concentrations to below 15 parts per billion because, well, that's already a mandatory law. And it the new system must be applicable to pre-existing pipes. So then we do not have to change as much to accommodate to the people. There must not be discrimination between communities based on race or income. This is a very important factor because we wanted to make sure that everybody got the same tools and equipment to make sure that they're healthy. It must allow for the water source to remain constant, so that way people aren't just left without any water, so then they have to go out and buy some other water. And then lastly, the new source or the new idea must not require additional funds by individuals or private organizations to receive proper filtering. And we came up with this idea because we didn't want any one particular person to get additional benefits. And then for the criteria, we decided that the lower the parts per billion, the better, because any lead is bad. So until it gets to 0, that's just when it's perfect. The more cost efficient, the better, since lead filters and anything that will get rid of lead will always cost a lot of money, but some systems cost less than others. And we also wanted to make sure that the system was environmentally friendly. So then we weren't disrupting the environment and ruining any natural forests or reducing any biodiversity in the area. And so we also wanted to make sure that the process was less invasive to an existing infrastructure. And this was a very important idea, so that at least not a lot of material would have to be torn down and replaced. So that way, everything as much as possible would remain constant, and this would help with the price. And then the last piece of criteria was the less harmful chemicals added to the water or the pipes, the better. And this was also an important idea because if you add too many chemicals, at some point it won't become water. It will just be something else that appears to be water.
So here are all the ideas that we as a group brainstormed. First, we came up with put water filters on pipes. That's a pretty standard solution. Basically, we want to intervene with every pipe, not changing the structure of the pipe itself, but fitting a water filter to the pipe, so that way any water that comes through, it won't just filter out lead. Hopefully it will also filter out other contaminants. We talked about running an electrical current through part of the water to attract lead ions. This was talked directly to a chemistry professor who does research in this area. He runs an electrical current. He passes ionic compounds through an electrical current, and the current can actually separate certain ions. So that's where the idea came from. We said, don't let anyone use the water. I mean, brainstorming ideas, you're not supposed to turn down anything. So one solution is technically letting everyone use bottled water instead of tap water. And then we came up with give every individual home $1,000 to deal with the problem themselves. Maybe inspired by Trump giving everyone $1,000 a week recently to deal with quarantine. But basically saying, if by handing out money to the individuals, we'd say, okay, buy the filters, buy POU, certified POU filters yourself. And well, it would potentially get rid of the problem. Then we also talked about in a similar vein of thinking, giving every individual home filters for tap water. And this would it wouldn't change the infrastructure of the existing infrastructure of the city at all, but it would potentially cost a lot of money. So that's the only problem with that idea. We talked about changing the water source, maybe switching from, like a lake to a river. The water levels will automatically have less lead in them. And then we talked about replacing all the pipes with PVC. PVC is plastic. So basically plastic can't become corroded, and the corrosion in the pipes is what causes the lead poisoning. So similarly, we talked about inserting a plastic coating on the inside of pre-existing pipes to prevent corrosion. We mentioned scrape out all the corrosion. I'm not necessarily sure if this is possible, but potentially by clearing out all the corrosion manually, you could restore the pipes back to their original state where there was no lead, there was no influx of lead. We talked about adding minerals to the water because by adding minerals, this could somewhat combat the lead levels in water. And then our final one was insert lead detection / lead filter beginning 3 pipe junctions away from the output. So obviously the lead detection device would be good in a long-term sense because even if the lead filters bring down the lead levels of the water, the city or government would be notified anytime by the detection devices whether or not the lead levels were going back up.
So we then applied wait, can you guys be quiet for like 2 minutes? All right, sorry. All right, you can start here. So we then applied the constraints to the different ideas that we brainstormed just to decide if they met the constraints or not. So for the first one, put water filters on pipes. This meets the constraints. You're not discriminating against any group. It's applicable to the pre-existing pipes, etc. Okay, so for the second one, run electrical current through part of water to attract lead ions. This does not meet the constraints because it does not reduce lead concentrations to lower than 15 ppb. For the third one, don't let anyone use the water. This does not meet constraints because it's not applicable to the pipes. Like, you have to come up with something that's very out of the price range of the government and will require additional funds, as we'll have to pay for water bottles and some sort of other drinking water for everyone. For the next one, that past one also discriminates against groups because if they can't drink the water and the new source of water isn't being provided by the government, then they're having to pay on their own, which is very discriminatory based on income. The next one, give every individual home filters for tap water. This does meet the constraints. This will reduce lead concentrations to lower than 15 ppb. It's applicable to pre-existing pipes, does not discriminate, allows the water source, such as a lake or a river that is being used now, to remain constant, and doesn't require additional funds from individuals or private organizations to receive proper filtering. For the next one, change the water source. This does not meet the constraints because one of our constraints is that the water source must remain constant. For the next one, number 6, replace all pipes with PVC. This does not meet the constraints because it's not applicable to pre-existing pipes. For the 7th one, insert plastic coating on inside of pre-existing pipes. This does meet the constraints. You're not having to destroy or build new pipes. You're just changing or modifying the ones that are already there. For number 8, scrape out all of the corrosion. This does not meet the constraints because this won't reduce lead concentrations to lower than 15 ppb. For the next one, 9, add minerals to the water. This does meet the constraints. For number 10, insert lead detection and lead filter devices in every other pipe junction, beginning 3 pipe junctions away from all outputs. This does meet the constraints, even though it's probably a very costly option, it does. For number 11, our last one, give every individual home $1,000 to deal with the problem themselves. This does not meet the constraints because this is discriminatory between communities based on race or income, and also their education level, because if someone is not at the same education level as another, they don't have as good of an advantage of picking a proper thing to buy to reduce the lead in their house, and thus are not given a fair opportunity.
So as discussed before, the 5 criterias that we went with were the lower the PPV level, the better; the more cost efficient, the better; the more environmentally friendly, the better; the less invasive to existing infrastructure, the better; and the less harmful chemicals added to water/pipes, the better. And so the way we create the rubric for each one of these is different. And so starting with the lower the PPV level, the better, we decided to go with the best option being 0 parts per billion, because, well, it doesn't get any lower than that. And the worst to be 15 parts per billion, because, well, that was our, everything had to be below 15 parts per billion in order to meet our constraint. And in between there, we went with an equal interval, or a relatively equal interval that would just drop each possible idea into its own little category. And then so for the more cost efficient, the better. There were only 3 sections for this because there could only really be 3 sections. It either requires the government to raise the taxes. It's either possible within the budget or be within the budget, and then or there could be money left over, and that money could be used on other projects. The next idea was the more environmentally friendly, the better. And like the last one, there are only really 3 different categories that can be created for this, because the system will either harm the environment, have no effect, or be beneficial. And I mean, if it's beneficial, then it's going to get a 5, and if it's harming the environment, then it's going to get a 1, because it's very important that that the environment is being kept intact. And so for the next criteria, it's the less invasive to existing infrastructure, the better. And in this one, we were able to have 5 different sections, starting with lots of physical intervention to major supply lines. And this means that either supply lines will be destroyed or changed a lot. And then it will go all the way up to no physical intervention with pipes or the ground. And this means that no contact will have to be made with the actual pipes. So then the ground will not be dug up, and there will not be changes to the system that's already installed. And then for the last criteria, it's the less harmful chemicals added to the water/pipes, the better. And this one also has 5 different sections. And so the best would be a 5, and this would mean that there are no harmful chemicals added. So that way, when people are drinking their water, they know that the only thing they're drinking is water, and not water and a chemical that they might not even know about. And then the worst will be if there's a water to chemical ratio of 1:1, which means that there's just as many chemicals as there is a water molecule, which is not good at all. And then in the middle, it fluctuates between the different levels. So a 4 would be a 10:1, and then a 3 would be a 7:1, and then a 2 would be a 3:1. And as you can see, the level keeps going down until it hits that last one, which is a 1:1, which is the worst.
So for our decision matrix, we decided to do weights ranking 1 through 5, 5 being the most important, or in this case, 2 being the least. We said the lower the ppb level, the better was, we gave it a 5 because obviously no lead in the drinking water. That's the most important criteria for our solution. And then the more cost efficient, the better. We also gave it a 5 because the less money it will cost, you know, the more objective the government can remain when trying to execute the solution and provide it to different communities, and just the less taxing it will be on the local administration. The more environmentally friendly, the better. We gave it a 4 because we weighted it slightly less than lower lead levels and cost efficiency, but it's still extremely important to be environmentally then the solution will also hopefully benefit society on a larger scale than just preventing lead contamination. And then we gave the less invasive to existing infrastructure, the better, a 3, because we wanted to, it's still important, but it's not quite as important as the others, because there's going to most likely be some invasion to existing infrastructure no matter what. It's very hard to not have to disrupt the sidewalk or the sewer systems in order to place filters on pipes and things of that nature. And then the less harmful chemicals added, the better. This was given a 2 just in consideration of all of the other criteria we have. Certain chemicals might have to be added in order to purify the water, but the lower the ratio is, the better. The lower the ratio is, the more beneficial it will be. So then we gave each of the potential solutions a ranking 1 through 5 based on their score, and then we added all of those scores up. And basically the 2 best solutions we came up with based on the scores calculated from the decision matrix were put water filters on pipes, which it seems a little general, but really what we meant was going into each pipe directly, every supply line, and putting a physical water filter on the pipe. And it wouldn't just be able to filter out, it wouldn't just be focused on filtering out lead, it would also filter out other contaminants and pollutants in the water. So it would just benefit the community overall. And then our second best solution based on the scores was insert lead detection / lead filter devices in every other pipe junction, beginning 3 pipe junctions away from all outputs. It's similar to the first solution in that there's filter devices being placed on the pipes, except because there's also the additional cost of adding lead detection devices, we figured this one would probably be more expensive and most likely not leave any room left over within the government's budget. So it's just ranked slightly below putting water filters on pipes. And that's it. Here are
these are our sources. It's in the same order that we presented the articles, so it's easy to go through them and identify which source belongs to which article. And that's it. Thank you.
Thanks for watching.